Socialist Reconstruction of Society, Part 2 out of 3. The second class. This takes me to the second class of the three classes of the preamble that I proposed to take up with you. The last two of which are, as I stated in opening, pivoted upon the first which I have just demonstrated. The second class, I shall read it again as it follows. The working class and an employing class have nothing in common. In a way, this class also stands proved by the figures on this poster, together with the obvious conclusions that flow from them. Whatever the interests may be of a class whose material welfare steadily towers up, and the interests of the class whose material welfare and that thereupon depends sinks perpendicularly. I fucked that up. And in even tempo with the former's rise. As illustrated by these figures, whatever these two sets of interests may be, they can have nothing in common. The relations between these two sets of interests are not even the relations of two, though opposing, yet supplementary forces, such as physics tells us of. There is the relations between the vampire and the victims, whose blood it drains, and such relation surely establishes nothing in common. Of all one-sided relations, these relations take the cake and the pie. What? Okay, I think a better would be like, you have the cake, you need it too, or something. Because I don't have they changed that saying? I don't know. Indeed, people who prate about the mutuality, the brotherhood, the identity of interests of the capitalist or employing class and working class. Demand of the working man that for which they would spank their own children if they believed it possible. They want of you that you believe it possible to divide an apple between two men in such a way that each shall have a bigger chunk, an impossibility. If the working man produces $4 and the capitalist takes $2, there are only $2 left to the working man. If the capitalist takes 3, the working man has to put up with 1. If the capitalist appropriates 3.5, there's nothing but 50 cents left to the working man. Inversely, if the working man hangs on a whole dollar, the capitalist's share is reduced to 3. If the working man pushes forward and keeps 2, there are but 2 left for the capitalist. Should the working man pursue 3, the capitalist would have to put up with 1. And should the working man divide in such a way that he takes and holds all that he produced, my capitalist will have to go to work. In other words, he would cease to be a capitalist. Now then, the figures on this poster quite clearly illustrate the law that underlies the capitalist system of production. That law does not aid the working man to preserve an increasing share of his profit. It aids, it requires the capitalist to intensify his plunder increasingly. His chunk must be ever thicker, and correspondingly thinner must be the working man's slice. No common interest there. As far as this aspect of the class which I have read is concerned, it is too obvious to require further proof. But weightier sense and meaning and sense of more immediate practical pith and moment lie embedded in that class. It is an inevitable consequence of the falsehood regarding the hand-in-hand prosperity of capitalist and workingman that their relations are mutual, and consequently that they stand upon a footing of equality. Of course, if the two are getting along swimmingly, they must be peers, even if it's conceded that their peerage may be of different rank. Down from that apparent falsehood, set afloat by the capitalist professors, politicians, and politiciers, and zealously carried into the ranks of pure and simple unionism by the labor lieutenants of the capitalist class. A long line of descent of increasingly insidious and practically pestiferous falsehood may be traced. The ancestral falsehood of the hand-in-hand progress of capitalist and working men begets the son falsehood of the equality of working man and capitalist. The son falsehood begets the grandson fraud of contracts, and you will see how the grandson fraud litters a prolific progeny of its ilk to labor's undoing. What is a contract? I am not going to give you any socialist definition of the term. The term has nothing to do with socialism. It is a term the meaning of which has grown up with the race's experience. What the fuck? The definition I shall give you is the law book definition. It is the definition accepted and acted upon in the courts of equity. A contract is an agreement entered into by two equal parties. A contract is an agreement entered into between peers. A contract is an agreement entered into by two free men. Where the parties to a thing called a contract fall within these categories, they are said to be contracting minor power, and the document is valid. Where that which called a contract lacks these essential qualities, especially if lacks all of them, the thing is null, void, and of no effect. It is a badge of a fraud of which he is guilty who imposes the contract upon the other. Let me illustrate. Suppose that some Minneapolis agent of a lecture bureau anarchists to secure my invaluable services for this evening. Holy shit. Okay, you're awesome, but you're... Okay. The fuck, De Leon? I mean, why did you describe it so fucking... My invaluable services of a You're not the only one that could be speaking. I mean, oh well. Had written to me in New York asking for my terms, and suppose that I had answered that I would come for $500. He would have written back, wanting me to come down a peg or so. I would have replied, suppose after a considerable chaffering I had agreed upon $400 and he had yielded, whereupon a document would have been drawn up reading somewhat like this. John Jones, party of the first part, and Daniel De Leon, party of the second part, have mutually covenanted and agreed that the party of the second part will deliver an address in Minneapolis on the 10th day of July, and the party of the first part will pay the party of the second part for his services the sum of $400 in US currency. This document being signed would be a contract. If on the appropriate day I came, delivered the goods, and John Jones failed to pay me, I would have a just cause of action against him for breach of contract. If, on the other hand, I failed to put in an appearance, he would sue and recover damages from me on the ground of my breach of contract. Whatever people may think of the steepness of my price, the contract would stand. It would stand. Why? Because both he and I were free to accept or reject. Neither of us acted upon compulsion. We were both free agents. Now suppose that, instead of writing, he came down to New York, rushed into my office, wiped a gold horse pistol out of his hip pocket, cooked and held it with a nozzle an inch from my head and said, "Sign this," laying before me a sheet of paper containing this legend. John Jones, party of the first part, and Daniel De Leon, party of the second part, have mutually blah blah and solemnly agreed to bound themselves as follow, to wit, that the party of the second part will deliver an address in Minneapolis on the 10th day of July, and the party of the first part will pay the party of the second part for his services at the sum of 5 cents, which sum of 5 cents the party of the second part hereby acknowledges to be a liberal payment for his services. The said sum being agreed upon after a friendly and mutual understanding between the said party of the first part and the said party of the second part. Would I sign? Why, of course I would. I would sign above, below, the right, to the left. I would never stop signing. I would keep signing. I would keep on signing like a moving picture. Oh my god, I love that. Like a moving picture, like that. That was like absurd, then, or what? No, but where the fuck were I? In a moving picture, until that pistol was removed from my close, proximately to my temple. From its close. That is the situation of labor when it signs quote-unquote contracts. No say that he, John Jones, returned to Minneapolis with he contract in his pocket and glow of righteous patriotic continent on his face. Say he hires a hall, prints and circulates posters announcing the meeting, an address, and inserts advertisements in the papers. Say that he even pays the bills and does not cheat in that also. The day of the meeting the hour arrives, but not I. The hall fills, but not with me. Hour upon hour passes. Whoever else may be there, I am absent. The audience storms at him, calls him names, insists upon and gets its admission money back. Say that indigent at my breach of contract, John Jones were to institute a suit for damages against me. What would happen? He would be thrown out of court for a swindler. He might even be prosecuted for assault with intent to kill. That contract is null, void, and of no effect. It is a badge of fraud of which he is guilty. It is all that because I was not free, because he held me under duress. Exactly so with a working man who signs contracts, exactly so with the capitalist who extorts them. The working man does not stand upon a footing of equality with a capitalist. He is not of contracting mind of power with the employer. The latter holds over him the whip of hunger that the capitalist system places in the hands of the master, and with the aid of which he can cow his wage into a quiescence. Why, among themselves, and even in their public utterances, when the anger throws them off their guard, the apologists for capitalism hurt out the fact that only the flash of hunger can keep the working man in the treadmill. At the bar of man and justice, the contract that labor signs are null, void, and of no effect. And yet, what do we see? The spectacle is of such daily occurrence that it is assumed that the nature of a system, a deliberate maneuver, indulged in the employers jointly with their labor lieutenants to paralyze the labor movement, worse yet, to give it the aspect of a rat pit. This is the way it works. Say I am a railroad magnate. I make my schedules or contracts, not with all of my employees together, but with each craft separately, and there cannot be too many autonomous crafts among them to suit me. Incidentally, let me call your attention to the circumstance that the AFL is steadily disintegrating its national and international unions into autonomous crafts. Its candleholders endeavor to make much of the few exceptional instances in order to make it appear that the AFL itself is steadily becoming industrialist. The increasing volume of jurisdictional feuds tells the opposite tale. As I proceed, you will be able to appreciate the meaning of the absolute craft autonomy tendency that manifests itself in the AFL, but no return. I make my separate contract with each of the separate crafts engaged on my railroad line, and there cannot be too many of them to suit me. My contract will be my locomotive engineers is drawn up to expire, we shall say on April 15th. My contract with my switchman is drawn to expire upon September the 3rd. My contract with my fireman is drawn up to expire, say, on January the 21st. My contract with my trainman is drawn to expire, say, on November the 30th. And so forth. Down the line, as of many crafts, as pure and simple unionism splits my working men into. And I can't split them into too many for my comfort, each separate craft being tied up with a separate contract. Expiring on a separate date, I have the industry at my mercy. To say that contract, or no contract, obedient to that underlying law of capitalist endless screw, that economic law that neither capitalist nor his class can rein in, that relentless economic law which dictates their conduct in their wrestlings with one another, and that causes the capitalist to interpret these contracts to suit themselves. That my switchmen are driven to rebellion and strike. What do? I telephone to my chief labor lieutenants, the presidents, grand chiefs, and superlative secretaries of the national unions, and simultaneously I touch the button and set the press a-going. Both the capitalist newspapers and the labor papers, so-called, edited by the pupils of the Civic Federation. My labor lieutenants hasten to respond to my call. Like blackbirds, they hide themselves to the scene from the four quarters of the compass. And then, to the orchestration of infamous men, they have broken their contracts, scandalous men, they have violated their sacred agreement. And more to this effect from the press that I have set a-going, and that it causes every old woman of both sexes and of all ages to look askance at my striking switchmen as to many serpents under the grass. To the tune of that artificial concert, my national labor lieutenants fail to work. They do not turn their attention to the men on strike. The contract-breaking miscreants are below the contempt of my vicious labor lieutenant. They call around them the men in the other departments, engineers, firemen, conductors, etc., and with the aid of the understrappers, the local skates, address them in this language. Behold yonder scenes of iniquity. They have broken their contracts. It is a wonder the lightning of heaven does not come down and blast them. Surely the bones of the patriotic founders of this republic are rattling in the graves at the discovery that there can be such lawless men encumbering the soil of our freedom. The soil of freedom. This is kinda literally what's happening in America. When you're like, oh, I want like minimum wage, I guess. Oh, fuck you. The fucking patriotic founders of the republic, they rattle in their graves. Look at them, they broke the contracts. Surely you will not do the same. Surely you will not be so base. Surely you will be true. And the men just addressed cross their arms and their manly chest, and bowing low to the goddess of contract that has been conjured up before them, and the occasion make answer. Not we shall be loyal to our word, we shall respect our agreements, we shall not break our sacred contracts. Which translated into English means we shall scab upon our fellow wage slaves, and they do, and thus we have seen union locomotive engineers scabbing it upon union firemen, and union firemen scabbing it upon union brakemen, and a union brakemen scabbing it upon union switchmen down the line. And we have seen all these jointly scabbing it upon union trolleymen and upon all manner of other union men on strike, by transporting either the militia or military to dragoon the workers into submission, or the hungry employed to take the places of the men who went out. Thus we have seen union molders scabbing it upon machinists, union machinists scabbing it upon union elevator men, union cigar makers upon waiters, union waiters upon brewers, blah blah. What the fuck is a brewer? Union brewers upon WSOs workers, union teamsters upon carpenters, union bricklayers upon cement workers, union soft coal miners upon hard coal miners, and so down to the very last and least of the craft organization, and all against each. It is a fact, deep with significance, though it seems to escape the observation of the superficial observers. That is not the unorganized scab who breaks the strikes, but the organized craft that really does the dirty work. And thus each craft, when itself involved in a strike, fights heroically, when not involved in demands itself as arrant scabs, betrays its class, all in facetious reference to contracts. Only the other day we had a glaring illustration of this disrespectful performance in the city of New York, when the men of Belmont Interborough struck for living conditions, and Gompers, together with the other lackeys of the Belmont Civic Federation, ably assisted their local sub-lackeys, such as Mr. Morris Brown to the Gompers of International Cigar Makers Union number 144, hauled down the men on strike as contract breakers, revoked their charters as unworthy of unionism, proclaimed directly to Belmont that the men had done wrong, and meekly begged into his pardon for the sinners. Still another and more pathetic instance was that of the strike of the New York newsboys, to whom had raised the price of his paper. These little tots, who by their very appearance hurled in the open of the merciless cruelty of capitalism even the defenseless child, underclad, underfed, undershould, deprived of the innocent joys of childhood that are so essential to the building up of the future man. Stunned in schooling, prematurely thrown into the temptation of vice, walking, running, yelling monuments of capitalist cannibalism. These wives, what the fuck is that? WAAEIFS. Wives. Okay, anyway, wives walked before Typographical Union number 6 and asked for support. For the support of men, many of whom were fathers themselves, and who, had they stuck with the boys, certainly would have ensured them victory. Did they? An oath, I have an oath in heaven. Shall I lay prayery upon my soul? Asked the scoundrel in Shakespeare. A contract, we have a contract in the pocket of our master Hearst. Shall we lay breached upon contract upon our conscience? Asked the craft union compositors. Of course they wouldn't. They slobbered over the boys their sympathies. They bestowed upon them all the sweet words that butter no parsnips. And the boys went down in defeat. It should be here added, although in discretion, that when a year or so later the identical Typographical Union had its strike against the sun, those bearded men went down upon their knees before the identical boys whom they have left ill on the lurch and implored their support. Let the fact be recorded that all evidence in the inherent nobility of the human heart and in honor of childhood, the ever-renewing promise that human feeling and human instinct shall not perish from the earth, that when appealed to, the boys return the evil with good, and help their printers fight their strike. It was a pure breath of industrialism. And in Chicago, during recent months, what was the spectacle presented there? We saw the garnet workers' volatility, with drums beating and colors flying, march on the fray. They fought bravely and were beaten off the field. Thereupon the teamsters put on war paint and fell in support to the routed garment workers. They too fought with the desperation of heroes, and went down, possibly after them some 3rd Division of Labour may have taken the field to avenge the cause of the Teamsters. After these went down in the attempt to avenge the garment workers after the fight was lost. Do you know what would happen to the general who, in face of the embattled foe, instead of concentrating his forces for the fray, were to send one small division into the field of battle? Wait until that was destroyed. Then send a second small division. Again wait until that was routed. And then send a third, likewise to be wiped out. Until his powerful army was demoralized and took flight. Do you know what would happen to that general? He would be grabbed by the neck, court-martialed and shot in the back for treason. Now, I am no prophet, nor the son of a prophet, yet concluding that the facts that are thrown into the bar, I venture the statement on this 10th day of July 1905 that the day is nigh when the working class of America will court material for Comperses, the Mitchells, the Stoneses, whose generalship is sacrificing the army of labor. Court martial them for treason to the working class. Dude, I fucking wish that happened. I don't think. I mean, as AFL, Federation of Labor, or what the fuck it's called, it still exists, so I don't think that happened. But still, it would be epic that they just fuck you, and then they execute them for treason. Thus we trace, in direct line of descent from the ancestral falsehood concerning the mutuality of relation between the employing class and the working class, a long genealogy of fraudulent principles, culminating in contrasting the working class into paralysis, and the crop of evil that flow therefrom. Falsehood can only breed falsehood, and falsehood's spawn is evil. Inversely, evil can be served and damned by falsehood only. In the framework of the capitalist social system, the working class and the employing capitalist class have nothing in common. The principle is a beacon on the track of labor smarts to emancipation. That's not how you pronounce that. The contrary principle is a false light that lures to social wreck. So that was the second part of 3 in Socialist Reconstruction of Society. This was a lot. It was a bit shorter, like half shorter. The other one was an hour. But yeah, that was the second part. Third part is coming sometime, I guess.